So, to be clear about all of these lessons, practice is going to be your friend. Practicing awareness sounds like it's kind of the easiest thing in the world. So, it's the idea you just stop, you breathe, you get into it. You can do things like you can meditate, you can just find quiet time. But in its essence, it feels like something which is pure simplicity, which it is. It is pure simplicity when you think about it. What makes it challenging is the ability to let go, because it's not as easy as it sounds. We have such a compulsion to do, go, move, make progress that the idea of stopping and letting go is actually quite challenging. But it's a crucial step to getting unstuck and finding your power. And it's the step which is, like I said, is generally overlooked. It's not, it's kind of, it's glossed over. It's assumed that you've already made the right decision about what you're going to do, which seems kind of ridiculous when you break it down. If you're not in touch with what is it that you are trying to shift for yourself. And for a lot of women, what I'm hearing from them and the kinds of things that they are interested in, it's not a single thing. It's not, if I just have this job, I'll be happy. It's not, if I just achieve this thing, everything will be fine. It's more of an awareness at a deeper level that we want to find more meaning in our lives. We want to find more stability. We want to find a way of being able to show up, have some kind of impact, and quite often to be able to share our voice. Um, but there's also a measure of a need for safety and security, which makes sense because times are challenging, it's really difficult. There are lots of physical, um, but also, psychological, financial threats that women face, which are real. So, what women are kind of digging into and recognizing is that we want to find ways to to create a new reality which fits with our our real wants and needs. A lot of women are kind of waking up and going, I'm not prepared to compromise on how I spend my time. I I want to work, but I want to be there for my children. It shouldn't be this or that, and this will come into that kind of duality of thinking that we'll talk about later. But the point I'm making here is that very often it can be presented to us as if we can just get that job or if we can just get to that point, we'll be fine. But a lot of women are showing the kind of awareness and intuition that it's not really about that external thing. It's more about the shifts within me and how I want to live my life and show up that are important to me. So that's the first point to make in terms of the practice and what we're looking for. So, thinking about it day to day, you may have already developed a daily meditation practice, or you might do things like you could take breaks during the day. And that's a really good starting point because that shows that that's something that you're interested in, you're thinking about it, you're taking the time to do it. What we're trying to achieve is this sort of aspect of mindfulness that enables you to bring awareness to your thoughts and emotions regularly throughout the day. So it's that ability to, you may stop and do a body scan. That's something that's really popular, which you could do anywhere. You don't have to close your eyes. You're just bringing your attention to your body. And the honest truth is, I have found this really challenging for myself. And this is because there is this, not just in me, but I definitely feel it, this inbuilt need to make progress or have an impact. I feel for myself that I've been hardwired to feel like I have to be productive or I die. I mean, I know that sounds extreme, but it is literally like, it feels like a survival mechanism. It's, you've got to keep moving or you're done for. It's the idea that you have to keep figuring everything out in order to survive. So it's partly trauma based, but it's also cultural. It comes from perfectionism, it comes from the education system, which has an impact on our formative years as we're building our belief systems, but it also comes under gender roles. So understanding where it's coming from is helpful because it enables us to be a bit gentler with ourselves about it. Well, for me anyway, that's what I found, that there's always this tension of, oh, I should just be able to let go, or I should just be able to do this or that. But just bringing a bit of grace to yourself and recognize that there's a reason that you are responding to this or that you find it challenging is an important part of the process. And we'll talk about self-compassion in depth, but it really is bringing that quality to your own practice. Finding the time to care for ourselves is at the heart of finding balance. It's the kind of, so this is, I'm talking about the classic, you must put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on your child. So the problem is that doing that is counterintuitive if you spent your whole life feeling pressure to perform, take care of others, basically to make sure that you all survive. It's a pretty compelling motivation to keep repeating that same behavior. And it was often at the heart of pretty much every conversation that I would have with survivors of domestic abuse. I mean, this was the focus for any mother who was a survivor of domestic abuse. So for her, the whole focus was on her children. It was all about making the children safe, keeping the children happy. And very often, unfortunately, it would show up in the form of, I will put myself in harm's way and in danger to make sure that my children don't have to move schools, or that they don't have to be moved away from their family. So it was seen as like a sort of self-sacrificial thing. And what would generally and inevitably happen would be that the mum was placed at the point of the extreme where she could see that actually that the circumstances the child was in was damaging to them. Whether they were physically harmed or not, it was the experience of being exposed to that, which they always recognised eventually was harmful. So if you have to recognise that's at the heart of what's going on, that women are they're making all of their decisions based on what's best for their children, then that is a really significant belief system that you're trying to challenge. So it meant that I would have to break it down to a level beyond, the sort of basic idea is, in order for your children to be okay, you need to survive. You need to take care of yourself, because if you don't, your children won't have anyone because you're a single mum. That was kind of the basis. But what we're trying to take it to was, if you want your children to be happy and make positive choices for themselves, you need to model that behaviour to them. So if you want your children to take control of their own choices and you can feel positive in the direction that they're going in, you need to model it for yourself. You need to actually show up and do it. So the practice of kind of breaking that down and working with that is that it needs to be frequent. It has to be about regularity. It's a practice that is actually available to us at any time, but not just when we need it. So we need to remind ourselves to find ways to check in throughout the day. And whilst it sounds very simple, it's a skill that very few people actually learn. Taking the time to connect with how you're feeling and why you might be feeling like that is so kind of basic and fundamental, But you will see every day people who are not able to navigate the world in that way. It's the difference between somebody losing their mind in anger when somebody else cuts them up on the motorway or the freeway, and somebody who is able to stay in control and drive safely rather than recklessly. It's the ability to recognize, for example, when you're struggling to focus, because it could be because you haven't had enough to eat, or your mind is elsewhere, or you didn't get enough sleep. If you can practice the ability to understand your own thoughts, feelings, and needs, you can apply that to connect with your inner wisdom. It will really build up that connection to understanding what is showing up in your body, that in itself is wisdom. And this is something, it can be seen as being a little bit spiritualistic, but it is something which the clinical profession are open-minded to, because it's so obvious now in modern medicine how it's really almost kind of a ridiculous thing to compartmentalize all these different aspects of things that can go wrong with us. I mean, particularly the basic divide between mental health and physical health. I mean, I've felt from my personal experience, on a sort of cellular level, all the sort of what could be perceived as something physical was absolutely psychological. Something that could be seen as purely psychological absolutely showed up in my physical. So, for example, recovering from breast cancer, my feeling was, well, once I've been through surgery and I've been through radiotherapy, I'll be fine. And the breast care nurse had to point out the psychological impact, which I couldn't connect with. I was like, well, I'll just get better and I'll get back to work and it'll be fine. But it's only when you go through it, you understand how you can't disconnect them. Equally, when I went through the loss of my mum, going through grief, I, for some reason, thought I could compartmentalize it as something that I could kind of put away and then pick up when I felt ready to deal with it. But my body wouldn't let me. My body would just shut down. I had no control over it. So this is why it's really crucial to just understand that relationship more at a deeper level. So the way I like to talk about it is, if you think of it like you would if you were looking after a baby. And when a baby is crying, it could be any number of things. So the baby could be hungry, thirsty, tired, scared, uncomfortable, too hot, too cold. They could have a fever, they could have colic, they could have reflux. I mean, the list literally goes on forever. And if you've ever been trying to soothe a crying baby in the middle of the night whilst you're deeply sleep deprived, you will have a sense of how desperate that feels, how you would give anything just to solve that problem and work it out. But in that scenario, you will also find that over time, you can recognize the different types of cries. You can put into context what the baby has been through that day, whether or not they might have been ill lately, if it sounds like a sort of discomfort. You end up recognizing the signs about what the baby is trying to communicate, but you also increase your own skills to work out what else might be going on. So you can learn the same skills with yourself, which you can attune to your needs in the same way. And I've said that to clients before as an exercise. I want you to go away and consider how you could attend to your own needs in the way that you would for a child or baby. Because it really makes it feel like you're stepping out of the relationship with yourself, if you kind of take a step back and you look at it in terms of, well, I'm treating myself quite harshly. And if I were to treat myself in this more kind of loving, attentive way, that would feel completely different. And there's such a common theme for so many of us to go through the motions. So, for example, we have a poor night's sleep. We get up, we reach for the coffee, we prop ourselves up with quick fixes during the day and we soldier on. We wouldn't do that with a baby. I mean, if we did, it makes me think of how people of my grandparents' generation would talk about things like a little drop of rum on the baby's lips and then it would be knocked out for the night. And you just think, I really hope they didn't do that. And then you think, maybe they did. But the point is, that was a very misguided shortcut. And there's a reason why, if anyone did that, we don't do it anymore. So the point is that rather than reaching for the shortcuts to get rid of or push down or just kind of override, how about practicing a little curiosity? How about thinking more along the lines of, okay, that's showing up. When has this shown up before? You're kind of breaking it down in the same way that you would automatically when you're trying to problem solve for a baby crying. You will get a sense of the kinds of things that might bother them at certain times. So, for example, they might, because they're sleeping through the night, all of a sudden they'll get thirsty again and then they'll wake up. So you get a sense that, oh, okay, this is what happened before, this is what worked, let's try that again. So you can apply that approach to yourself. So for me, okay, so I'll get into the example with me. So having had a few health scares and then being pushed into perimenopause as a result of the preventative medication that I am now on, I often go through periods of extreme fatigue that just seem to come from nowhere. So when I was employed, when I was doing a 9 to 5, when that would happen, I would just reach for the coffee and buckle down and get through the day. I would just find a way to plough through because I just felt like that's just what I need to do. I need to be the warrior. I need to get on. So I'd say to my husband, gosh, I have no idea where this fatigue is coming from. So I'd go through the list. I'd be like, is it because of my recovery from breast cancer? Is it recovery from burnout? Is it recovery from, radiotherapy? Is it perimenopause? Is it hormonal menstrual changes? Have I had enough sleep? Have I got too much on my plate? And his response would sort of be, maybe all of the above, maybe all of those things. And I was trying to identify the cause of what was creating this level of fatigue in order to eradicate it. And that's the obvious response. That's what I was trying to achieve. I think that's what lots of other people try to achieve as well. It's what's expected. You have a problem that's interfering with or hampering your productivity. You need to find a way to eradicate it. You need to get on. You need to find a way through. You can't just be held back by, life-changing problems. And it makes it really clear how hard we are on ourselves. The idea that we just need to, buckle up, get on. It's not just being unkind to ourselves. It's actually dangerous because if we are in a place of squashing down our feelings, our thoughts, our needs, we're not going to be able to attend to them in any way. That comes down to something as simple as for me, finding a lump, realizing that I had to go to the doctor. I needed to take I needed to take care of myself with that. If I just squashed it down and said, oh, it's nothing, then things could have been very different. If you're practicing an approach of curiosity and taking an interest, then that is a very different space to seeing things as being black or white, one thing or the other, good or bad. it it puts them in context, it gives them colour, it gives them depth, it gives them meaning, and it gives you more of an understanding of your relationship to them rather than a problem to solve, a barrier to move, something to get out of the way. So it took me a while to understand that simple logic that you would apply to a baby. You know, you're tired, get some rest. You're hungry, eat something. You're feeling overstretched, take some things off your plate. It's this idea that almost like giving into these needs is some kind of a defeat. Like, so for example, a few weeks ago, I was hit with fatigue again, like normal, and I just had a mid afternoon nap. So what? Who cares? You know what? That's why I work for myself. That's why I made the decision to work for myself, because then I can work flexibly. I'm a perimenopausal breast cancer survivor who has 2 children, been through burnout, and I'm also a recovering people pleasing workaholic. If I'm tired, I'm going to have a nap, and people can just deal with it. And that's the reality of it. You know, I'm not alone in those things. You know, when you put it out like that, it sounds like, oh, that's a bit intense. But all of us are dealing with some form of what I just went through. And so, what is the issue with us dealing with that ourselves, supporting ourselves, giving ourselves what we need? It's really literally the difference between life and death. And I really mean that, because there are so many cases of circumstances where women have, I mean, a classic one, like I was saw the other day, a woman who was experiencing symptoms of a stroke, and her husband said not to worry, it was probably just stress and that she should go to bed. And then the next day it hadn't gone away. Her work colleagues were worried about her. She went to hospital, and by then it was too late. She was already, the damage was done. You know, it was more like intensive physiotherapy, recovery, speech therapy, rather than it could have been prevented, it could have been intercepted at the right time. So I can't stress this enough. It sounds simple, it sounds like something that is easy to do and comes naturally, but it's not. It takes practice, and it's critical. I mean, it's critical in terms of any sort of action that you take, any decision that you make. It's important that you have got a sense of you're working from a place of what you need, not responding to the external. And it's hard to break, because that is what we've been conditioned with, and that's what society expects from us, is that we will conform to what those external pressures or roles are. Okay, so now you have an idea of the importance of self-awareness and the changes that it brings. So then what I'd like to do is to get into the practice. So what I've done is provide a few exercises that will help you to engage with your self-awareness, and some links to useful websites. The purpose of the exercises are somewhat to connect with self-awareness, but also taking us into that space of connecting with our inner wisdom as well. Practicing body scans I've mentioned, which is a really helpful way to be able to check in during the day, and you can do it anyway, you don't have to close your eyes. There are all sorts of ways that you can integrate it into your day, and you're probably already doing certain aspects of this. But what I'd like you to consider is the relationship that you have to them, because you might be doing things like taking breaks to support your productivity, rather than taking breaks to check in with how you feel, what you need, what your thoughts are. Because the simple example would be, you know, you're tired, you have a coffee, you plow through. Okay, maybe you can't have a nap during the day, but you can find some alternative. You can maybe have an early night, but you can also have a break where you have a chance just to reset and be a bit gentler with yourself. It's really reframing that relationship. It's thinking, how can I How can I take best care of myself? Not how can I be more productive? How can I show up more? How can I do more? That's the difference. And that is the shift that we are looking for in terms of self-belief. So in summary, it's about setting the intention to check in with yourself through the day. Recognize the significant skill involved in being able to connect with your own needs and how rare that often is. Practice awareness as much as you want. If you're bored, if you're waiting in a queue, instead of reaching for your phone, check in with yourself. Get curious. Consider ways that you can connect with what you could call your inner wisdom or your core beliefs. Check in with that. Don't put pressure on yourself to feel like you've got to find the answers. I've got to find meaning. I've got to find the purpose of what I'm trying to do. The power of developing awareness by recognizing what you're thinking or feeling or what you need is in itself very powerful and can just be the vital step we need to make sense of what is happening to us now or what we are doing. Okay, so that's lesson 1. Like I said, there are links and exercises in the handout. Lesson 2 is coming tomorrow and it's all about zooming out. If you have any questions about any aspect of this lesson, then let me know. Send me a message, get involved in comments on Instagram or on YouTube. Okay, thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye.